Alright, hello guys, this is the third time I have tried to record this video. The first time I did it, I forgot to turn my shirt around. Um, I don't like people seeing the logo of where I'm working because I'm recording these videos right after work, but the message is not coming from my employer, it's coming from me. And then the second time I was like 8 minutes in and got interrupted by one of those random scam phone calls. So anyways, what I want to talk to you guys about today is a different way of seeing the world, or more accurately, multiple different ways of seeing the world. This is a word that I made up 5 or 6 years ago, with all this talk about optimism and pessimism and realism that was going on at the time. People saying, "I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist," and so the word I made up is Perspectivism, and it's an attempt to look at the world from multiple different perspectives, not just the optimistic, not just the pessimistic, but both of those and every single one in between. And I think, to me, it's the best way to see things. If you think of the example that the story that people, I don't know if you've heard this story before, of all these blind people who are touching an elephant to figure out what it is, and the first person is touching the tail and says that an elephant is like a rope, and another person has its trunk and says an elephant is like a snake, and another person has the foot and says an elephant is like a tree. And the point of the story is that we all have a limited view, but if you can take and try to see and understand multiple viewpoints and bring them together, then that seems to be the most accurate way to see the world and the most useful way to see the world. I want to make an argument for optimism too, by the way, because I think optimism gets, at least by the people I'm around, it gets shut down because people tend to think that it's about having expectations that are unrealistically optimistic, which is not what optimism is about, as far as I'm concerned. To me, optimism is about it's about interpretation, not expectation. Let me say that again. Optimism is about interpretation, not expectation. So what does that mean? It means that when something that you've decided not good has happened to you, optimism says, what good can I take out of this? And to me, that's realistic optimism, and the only kind of optimism that makes sense. The other kind that people think of that makes them cynical and pessimistic is that I have to have optimistic expectations of the future, and then those expectations will magically just occur. I think there might be some people who actually believe that, but I think there are very few people who believe that. I think pessimism can be useful too, if pessimism is in relation to expectations and not interpretation of the present conditions. If you think about, if someone is planning for something or just thinking about the future in general, it's best to at least acknowledge the possibility of bad things occurring and plan for those. don't think many people would dispute that. Now, there is a degree to which, if you're constantly planning for and hoping for the worst, you actually bring the worst to be, and that's sort of, that's goes along the lines of the law of attraction sort of deal, where you kind of draw what you put out there. I know I'm not doing like a great job of explaining that, and there's probably a lot more to the law of attraction, but there is a degree to which, like I said, if optimism is in relation to expectations, it's probably not that useful, and if pessimism is in relation to interpretation of your present moment, then it's also not that useful. This goes back a little bit to that other video I made called How Gratitude Will Help You Survive, where I talked about, when you're grateful, you're taking stock of the good things that you have, and being able to use those as tools to help you out. And to me, that's what realistic, useful optimism does. So one of the cool things about Perspectivism is that if for no other reason than to help other people understand your point of view, it works. Which is a weird way of viewing it, because you'd think that Perspectivism is to help you, understand other people's point of view, which is great, but I think internally most of us don't really want to understand other people's point of view, and that's just a result of our personal biases. But if you're trying to convince somebody of your point of view, I remember I was arguing on Facebook at one point, which I try not to do anymore, because it's not that useful, and it doesn't change people's point of view, but it can strengthen yours, can strengthen your argument, so you're not saying as many stupid things. But I was arguing on Facebook, and this was with a kid I knew, and I remember the moment when I just decided to just momentarily accept his point of view and try to listen, and then I can't remember what I said after that, but I just said okay, I will, I'll something like, I'll accept this, I'll decide to kind of agree with this. And this was honestly, kind of a shift in my entire perspective of how I saw the world. Because I realized that when you acknowledge other people's perspective, this is the funny thing that happened. He was willing to listen to me after I listened to him, which is, who'da thunk? That people are more willing to listen to you when you listen to them. And so I actually did convince him of some thoughts and ideas, and it was pretty interesting to me. And so this seems to be one of the problems that we run into a lot, and I think it's the reason, the Joe Rogan podcast, which I love, which is awesome. Podcasts like this have become more and more popular because they're long form conversations where he's actually willing to just listen to what the person has to say and most people, when they're talking, they're just waiting for their turn to say what they have to say, and it's sad, but you know, but it's very often the case, and I think it's maybe more and more the case with social media and with our kind of disconnected culture. But that is the cool thing about, the Joe Rogan podcast and having long form conversations where you can listen to and understand people. And to me, it's just so useful. Besides the idea of convincing other people, it's good to convince other people, but I do think it's better to learn new things, especially to find out that you're wrong. We don't like to be wrong, and if you're honest with yourself, you find that out. It's hard to admit you're wrong, but it's so much better than actually staying wrong. And so I think it's always useful to try to get as many perspectives as possible, to try to see how the glass is half full, how it's half empty, how it's completely full. I remember I spent a lot of the time thinking about that glass analogy. From a scientific perspective, the glass is completely full because it's filled with water and air, unless it's in a vacuum, or there are just there's different ways of looking at it, and it's fun to me to think about that. A lot of the times, you'll hear me argue an evolutionary perspective or a religious perspective, which seem to both contradict each other, but I think both sides can be useful in viewing the world. Whether they're completely factually accurate or not. And that's what I always say, when I talk about the biblical stories I mentioned, like when I mentioned Jesus Christ yesterday and his sort of sacrifice. It doesn't matter. I believe those things are true, but it doesn't matter whether you accept those things as factual. And there's a lot of things that I don't know, and I'm also willing to say I don't know. A lot of people are not willing to say that, and it's kind of sad and ridiculous. It's really presumptuous to claim that you know anything, in my opinion. And maybe that's just because I've looked at so many different perspectives, but there's. So I've talked about this, and why do we believe what we believe? And yes, it's good to have a framework through which you see the world, and so it makes sense to hold on to a belief system. And yes, I'll still say that you can't be atheistic in that, but at the same time, you still don't know. Even if your belief system works, you still don't know, and that's why it's always useful to try to see things from a different perspective, to try to look in places that you wouldn't normally look, because that's where you'll find the things that you're missing. And I believe that, and I found that throughout my life. So, I'd encourage everyone to try to take an honest look at something in a way that you haven't looked at it before, and try to see the world through somebody else's eyes. And instead of doing the lazy thing and assuming that people are just stupid, maybe take some time to consider that maybe you're stupid. And I don't mean that as insulting. I think we're all limited, like the elephant analogy. We have a limited view, and so as much as you can take in other viewpoints, I don't think it'll hurt you. There's a scripture, I think it's like 1st or 2nd Thessalonians, that says, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. And I don't think that's bad advice. By the way, when it says prove, it means test. Test those different viewpoints. Try them on. See if you can put yourself in a place where you actually can suspend your disbelief, and act as if you actually believe that. And you don't have to, this is the great thing, you don't have to stick with something. You don't have to, die for a cause just because you decide to consider it. You can think about things without being converted and committed to them. That's the great thing about ideas. That's the great thing about thinking. We think, I think I heard this quote from Jordan Peterson, but he might have been quoting somebody else. We think so we can let our thoughts die, and we don't have to. We can think things out and see where they die, and not have to go kill ourselves trying everything out, physically trying everything. So yeah, I encourage everyone to do that. And I think the world would be a better place if we all did. So that's what I've got for you today. And if you like that, you can, like I said, follow my YouTube channel at Kelton Out Loud. Follow me on Facebook at Kelton Out Loud. And like, subscribe, comment, share. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.